Hi, it's Loren Lockman from the Tanglewood Wellness Center. And I've been asked to talk a little bit today about what happens after the fast vis-a-vis muscle and strength. Because when we go through the fasting process, we're going through a series of different phases. And the third phase of the process, your body is going to be relying primarily on muscle, converting muscle into sugar. And it does that because it's always looking for the most efficient way to get its needs met. And muscle's a more efficient source of fuel than fat. So the body goes into this process of cannibalizing its own muscle, but it only happens briefly. And how briefly it happens depends on your body composition. So someone who has a lot of muscle relative to their body fat is going to spend a little bit more time in that phase, and someone who's got very little muscle is going to spend less time in the process because the body realizes, okay, still no food, I don't want to lose any more muscle, time to stop. At which point it goes into, it's what we call the protein sparing point, where it switches over to using adipose tissue, long-term fat stores, as the primary source of fuel. Now, from that moment on, it's still using muscle, but if you're resting as completely as possible, it's using a tiny amount of muscle. And that's because your brain is always looking for glucose, and there's no sugar available from metabolizing fat. So the whole body runs on ketones, but the brain still wants some sugar and is going to break down some muscle to do that. So if you're fasting for weeks, as everybody here is, most of you are here for fasting for 3.5, nearly 4 weeks, for most of you, some of you longer, and some of you a little bit less than that, you're going to lose some muscle, and there's no way around that. Is this an issue? Well, if you're planning on entering the world's strongest man or woman contest right after you leave here, it might be an issue because you are going to lose some strength initially, most of you. But remember a couple things. First of all, strength and muscle mass are not the same thing. They're two different things. And the reason they're not, I mean, it might seem that they would be, that the more muscle you have, the stronger you would be. But that's not necessarily true. Why wouldn't it be? Well, because as is true with everything else around the body, it's about efficiency. So you can have less muscle mass but greater strength by being as efficient as possible. And I'll never forget when I was at the U.S. Air Force Academy on the wrestling team, the strongest, we had, back then we had universal weight machines. I don't know if any of you remember the universal machines, or if they're still out there. These were the rectangular plates, all the different stations. It was a big machine, room-sized thing, and you would put the pin where you wanted it. The only guy on the team that could bench the entire stack, I don't remember how much that was, but the only guy that could lift the entire stack was the second smallest guy on the team. He wrestled at the 115, I don't remember the weight class, I think it was about 110, 115 pounds. Little guy. And he was benching more than twice his own weight, where the biggest guys on the team couldn't do that. So it's not necessarily about muscle mass, it's about efficiency. But you also want to understand that when we're looking at the loss of muscle tissue, it's almost as if, a better analogy than the one I gave you earlier. Let's imagine that we have a paper cup, okay? We've got a paper cup and we want to know the mass of that cup. Well, the cup is full of water. So the mass of the cup is, when we look at the cup, we pick the cup up, what we're getting is the mass of the cup plus the water in it. Now if we cut 2 inches off the top of the cup and fill it up with water, it's going to weigh much less. How much cup have we lost? Not very much. But the weight of the water that it's holding is the majority of what's disappearing. Well, as soon as we replace that cup with a taller cup again, the water is available. That's not a problem. In the same way, our lean tissue is mostly water, ideally around 80% water. In practice, what I've measured with more than 2,000 people is the average person's lean tissue is closer to around 67, 68% water. So more than 2/3 water, almost 70%. That means that for every pound of muscle that we lose, that we're seeing lost, actually 70% of that is water, and only a little more, only about 1/3 of that is, or less, is actually muscle tissue itself that's being converted to sugar. So when we're looking at regaining that strength, regaining that muscle mass, we're only having to rebuild about a third of what it looks like we've actually lost, because the rest, the water, comes back on its own. Okay? But again, I mean, the most important piece here is that we're talking about efficiency, how efficiently the body works. And most people are going to leave here and are going to feel and function better than they have in a long, long time. Pretty much as soon as you get home. And then it's going to get better and better from there. Now, there are exceptions, and you want to understand that everyone's different. So here at Tanglewood, our refeeding process is set up to be proportional to the length of the fast. And so those of you fasting for 3 weeks are refeeding for less time than those of you fasting for nearly 4 weeks, who are refeeding for less time than someone fasting 5 or 6 weeks. But the time is, the process is designed to allow the vast majority of people when they leave here to be doing perfectly well. Does it work for everyone? No. Every once in a while we'll have someone that could have used more refeeding time. So when they get home, they're essentially still going to be in that process of getting back on their feet and aren't going to be functioning at the same level that most people will. But most people are going to be doing perfectly well by the time they leave here. I mean, most people when they leave are feeling fantastic. And the last session, we had a woman here who fasted 21 days, was very weak the last 2 of those 3 weeks. And when she began refeeding, I remember sort of third or fourth day, and she was thinking, I still feel incredibly weak. I don't know if I'm going to be ready to go home. Like, she was really concerned that she wasn't going to be strong enough. And yet, I told her to relax, that she'd probably be fine. Sure enough, by the end of the process, she felt fantastic, energetic, and was able to go do whatever she needed to. And it's not unusual to have people go home and literally be able to lift more weight than they could lift when they got here, even if they've got less muscle mass, because their body is functioning at a much higher level than before. And that's going to continue to improve as you become better hydrated. So if you follow the program I've given you, most of you have come in, again, averaging 67, 68% lean hydration. But when you leave here, if you follow the program I'm going to give you, your lean hydration is going to continue to increase until it's 70, 73, 75, 77, 78, 79%. And when that happens, your body is going to work much more efficiently than it did before, in every possible way. Okay? Any questions about any of that? Anybody? Well, I hope that's useful. I'll see you next time.